It's a very, very brief special report, but it's targeted specifically on how to fight the blanket upzoning in Calgary by yourself and in your own neighborhood. And it's very, very difficult, or at least it's legally complex to remove these things once they're installed. And once they're installed, it just means that it'll stay a single, like your neighborhood, along with all of your neighbors who agree to this thing, will stay single family homes, and the homes will not be legally allowed to be sold to developers who want to change it into multiplexes and things like that. And the other part of the Calgary issue is, of course, the sewers, all the infrastructure built to that property is rated for a single family home, right? If you want to put an 8-plex in there, which you'd be allowed to under the new rules, I think 8 families is the total. That's what it says in the article, but I could be wrong about that. 4 families or 8 families, you're increasing the number of toilets, you're increasing the number of all sorts of, like, electricity, all sorts of stuff. And the underpinning infrastructure isn't built for all of that. And so, like, that's another problem that is being ignored. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we're starting in China. Sam Cooper says, well, it's Canada, but Chinese interference in Canada. How's that? Sam Cooper says, stand by for this big file. Evidence is coming together on senior Trudeau staff influence in intelligence that relates to PRC, People's Republic of China influence. And so what happened? A couple hours later, Stephen says Hogue inquiry turns into questions about former Bill Blair chief of staff, Zita Astravas. I'm getting that terribly wrong. I'm sorry. And an alleged 54-day delay in the signing of a surveillance warrant, as a lawyer for Michael Chong puts it. Gib Van Ert then raises May 2023 Globe story about Bill Blair's office delay in signing warrant to target Liberal power broker Michael Chan. Government lawyer intervenes to object to Van Ert's effort to discuss the target of the warrant. So this is getting into, did they know earlier than they warned Chan? It seems like they did, and it's documented that they did, and so people are going to be upset about that kind of stuff, right? Sam Cooper says this file will be updated this afternoon. It's a big day for cross-examination of Vinod regarding Jody Thomas and Bill Blair and PMO staff. Sam Cooper continues, a growing body of evidence at the Hogue Commission is painting a damaging picture for Prime Minister Trudeau's administration, suggesting that senior officials may have not only influenced changes to intelligence reports regarding Trudeau's party members, but also shielded Canada's leader from sensitive intelligence on Chinese election interference, and may have delayed CSIS investigation into an influential Liberal Party member. So they were investigating. It took them to an influential Liberal Party member, and then there was stonewalling and all the rest, right? Pretty wild stuff. Sam Cooper continues in a different tweet. Breaking, MP Chong's lawyer accuses Trudeau's security advisor of crafting memo to cover up failures to warn Chong of PRC targeting. Sam Cooper, well, this is a little surprising, though. This is a quote, sorry, he's quoting. This is a little surprising, though, in my situation to you, because Ms. Thomas seems to be telling the Prime Minister that the national security community generally let the Prime Minister and the ministers down, Chong's lawyer said, but everything that I see indicates that CSE was knocking on doors all over town. So they knew, and they were being stonewalled. And that's, I mean, it seems like that's the tactic. Just don't engage. Just don't engage. I was on with Spotify this morning. I've been emailing, trying to understand. They accused me of violating their dangerous content policy, which means that I encourage somebody, or they're accusing me of encouraging somebody to do something dangerous or engage in a dangerous challenge, which I don't do, and I don't do. I just don't do that. And so I asked them for the timestamp. They gave me the titles of the episodes that were in violation of the policy, but episodes, the counter episode, so I do a half-hour episode and then a full episode, and the episodes are the same, except the full episode has sometimes half an hour more, sometimes 40 minutes more, whatever it is, right? So there's the free episode and then the long episode. So one of them is a free episode and one of them is a kitchen table talk, which is just one. And I said, okay, what's the timestamp? Like, where did I violate the policy so I can be sure that I don't accidentally violate your policy again, because it wasn't intentional to do it in the first place. And then they responded with, our team's investigating it. And I said, also, how do you comply with with the charter rights, like with my ability to have free expression? How do you comply with that with this takedown order? They said, our team's investigating it. And then they delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. It was September 5th when I got the second notification, and I started the conversation with them. Since September 5th, they've done nothing but put me off and say, our team's looking into it. And then somewhere around the 20th, they said, your episodes will not be republished on our platform. And I was like, okay, it's weird because like one of the episodes is still up in the full episode under the paywall. But anyway, whatever. I mean, it's weird. And all I want is them to specify how I violated their policies, and they won't. And so they're not responding to emails at all. And I keep asking to be elevated because they're not addressing my concerns. And so I went into the Spotify chat bot and I was asking, hey, chat bot, why aren't people emailing me back? Like, I'd like the email of the customer service manager because this has been handled poorly. And I have questions that your customer service team is not addressing. And they turned the chat off on me. They ended the conversation. I was like, what? And so like, I have no recourse now other than legal. Like, I have to spend money and legally go after Spotify to understand why these episodes were removed. And so like, that's weird, right? Like, so censorship and stonewalling somebody, just not responding to them, period, is a tactic used by the left in order to get their way, because I can't punch something I can't target, right? And if they're not going to respond to me, I can't get anything back. There's no traction. So and they don't seem to care. Like, they don't care. There's censorship as well. There's all sorts of censorship. Anyway, I digress. Globe Politics, Globe and Mail is writing about this. And I mean, be careful with the Globe and Mail because they lie. They lie about everything. And their biggest customer is the government. And so they'll publish lies that the government wants them to publish. So that's unnerving, right? Globe Politics says, former Canadian parliamentarian tried to influence parliament on the behalf of a foreign state, inquiry told. Right? Like we didn't know that, though. We've known that for a while. We've known that since March 23, and it hasn't been really a problem for anybody. It doesn't seem to be talked about at all. Pierre Poilievre wants to have a carbon tax election. I'd really like to have there are Chinese traders in our House of Commons election. But it doesn't seem to be on the list of things that Poilievre wants to talk about. Could there be Chinese traders in the CCP as well? I think possibly we need to understand how all 338 MPs fell in line with the globalist plan to shut down Canada's economy. I'd really like to understand all that, because I think that our entire system is corrupt. Rex Glazier is responding to CP24 saying former parliamentarian may have worked on behalf of a foreign government. He says, what's the point of this exercise? We know the Trudeau government is fully infiltrated with Chinese operatives, but nobody will name them. Trudeau doesn't care. He won 3 elections with their help, and he's not going to out them, right? And it's pretty wild. Ham Sandwich here says, stop withholding the names. Canadians have a right to know which parties are being puppeteered by which foreign governments so we can vote accordingly. Keeping the names secret just strengthens the perception that democracy is dead and we're being ruled by untouchable elites. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. And there's another tweet that I wanted to read. Karen says, I heard you this morning, Sam Cooper, with Alex Pearson on Talk 640, color me asleep at the wheel, but I did not realize that the 11 MPs were only from the GTA, and there's 50 plus more all across the country. Seems we're losing the battle no matter how this inquiry turns out. The Hogue inquiry is done to silence anybody who wants something done about this. They say we're doing something, but it's like the 9/11 Commission, where doing something is just taking control of the narrative, finding out what evidence they have, and then quashing it specifically, like building content specifically to quash the evidence that is brought to light, right? Like, oh, okay, this is what they've got. All right, let's destroy that and fix all this so it's all above board and nothing ever happened. That's just my speculation. But anyway, former parliamentarian may have worked on behalf of a foreign government. Which foreign government? Oh, you can't talk about that? The heck you say. Invasion, let's talk about that. Michael Schellenberger is talking about the United States, and we have to talk about the United States because what's happening in the United States is happening in Canada. These people, Kamala Harris, who is the border czar under Biden, Justin Trudeau, who's the leader of Canada under Xi, all of these people are destroying the sovereignty of each Western country in its own right. And we're being flooded with foreigners to sow chaos, and not even just foreigners, but violent foreigners, criminal foreigners. And that's just been proven in the United States. And that goes to sow further chaos. You've got criminals coming in, not just people who are poor, not just people who are low skilled, not just people who are having difficulties in their own countries, et cetera, being sent to our countries. And some would say that's trafficking, right? Like that's human trafficking. If you're a 3-letter agency, if you're an NGO and you spend $100 to move somebody from some place in East Asia, wherever that may be, or a Middle Eastern country or an African country, any of those places, to the West, isn't that engaging in human trafficking? Isn't that bad? Like, even if there's somewhere for them, but aren't they illegal? So like, isn't that bad? Wouldn't it be bad if I targeted a random girl from a random country that's poor, and I was like, listen, I'm going to give you a better life, baby, right? Or I didn't even have to be creepy about it. I could be like paternal about it. I could say, listen, I desperately want to, give you a better life. Come here. Wouldn't that be human trafficking? So why are the three-letter agencies allowed to do that, right? Like, if I can't do that, and I shouldn't be allowed to do that, then like, I shouldn't be allowed to target 10, 12, 15 people, or even one. You know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't be able to do that to one person, right? And is that not the whole trial thing for the Tate guys? I digress. But still, is that not human trafficking, and why can the NGOs engage in it? Why? That's very, very strange, because that's going on, and it's being proven in the US, and it's happening here too. And so how do you stop that? Because that is a weapon, and nobody's talking about it that way. Michael Schellenberger says, no matter your politics, the new numbers are shocking. Of the 7 million migrants that ICE released while their cases are being processed, 663,000, that's a lot, have criminal records, have criminal histories. 13,000 were convicted of homicide, 16,000 of sexual assault, and 1,845 face homicide charges. Okay, hold on. How many is that per state? If you look at just the murderers, or like the rapists and the murderers, right? 16,000 rapists, sexual assault. That's 320, right? And 1,300 divided by 50, 320 per state, or murderers 26 per state. Well, that's not too bad. Hold on. No, that's 200. It's 260. I forgot a zero. There you go. That's better. 260. Boom. So 260, 320 murderers, rapists. They're not sending their best, right? And it's not so good. And this is September 25th, U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement sending this letter citing those numbers. Okay? That's insane. That's absolute madness. That is not what a government that wants to have a peaceful, prosperous society does. Like, oh, come on in, murderers and rapists. We love to have your kind here. Would you like a house? Like, unbelievable. Here's Donald Trump talking about what Kamala Harris has done to the United States. Not just her, but her and her ilk. Here we go.
It's not sustainable by any country what's happening to us in the United States. Millions and millions of people, 21 million plus, have been dumped into the United States, and many of them are murderers. Many of them are horrible criminals. What Kamala Harris has done is unforgivable. It's a crime, what she did. It's got to be criminal. There's no greater act of disloyalty than to extinguish the sovereignty of your own nation, and that's what she's done. She's ruined our nation. She's ruined our nation.
Right? I don't think he's wrong. And it's not just Kamala. It's Biden. It's Trudeau. It's Starmer. It's all of them. It's Jacinda Ardern. It's Merkel, right? And the rest of the German leadership since Merkel, all of the British leadership, all of them, right? Sunak and back through to Liz Truss and so on further back. I think the EU, the Eurozone, was probably an attack as well in and of itself. And I remember I was in England in 1999, and the Hong Kong lease was ending, and that was big news. And the Eurozone was coming in, and that was big news. And people were very split on it. They didn't like it. My grandparents didn't like it at the time. People were upset about it. And like, they didn't feel like they had much of a choice because people had voted. But the idea was, or they were upset because they didn't feel like their side had been given a proper say in the press, et cetera, et cetera. And they were right? But I was a kid, so I didn't know. But they were right. And then it took how long to get Brexit done? 15 years, right? Maybe 99, the Eurozone had just come in. It was fresh. It was really being talked about. My grandparents were like politics, so we talked about it a lot. And we were driving in cars and stuff. Like, we were driving, because going to different sightseeing places, right? You're driving in cars and people are discussing politics. And I mean, it wasn't like you had a phone. It wasn't like you had headphones. Although I think I did have like a Walkman or something like that, but the batteries ate like were eaten very quickly. So I listened to what everybody was talking about. So this is why I do this show. Anyway, regardless, Elon Musk is talking about this too. Colin Rugg is sharing the Fox News totals, and like the totals are unbelievable. Just in, new ICE reports reveal that the Biden-Harris administration has let in 425,000 illegal immigrants who are convicted criminals. So there's different numbers being reported by different outlets. Elon Musk says this is criminal. Yeah, probably. Sure is. Here is in Canada, Rebel News. Quebec wants the other provinces to get their act together and start taking migrants. Why aren't we talking about how these migrants are weapons against our country? And we should respond as if it's an attack, because it is an attack. And we are going to use the money to return these people, these victims of George Soros or whoever is using the money to traffic these people in as weapons. They're victims, and we should cast them that way. And we should restore them, make them whole by returning them to their home, and then prosecute these criminals like the human traffickers who are using our tax dollars to traffic these people, right? That could be a vector, right? Jeepers creepers. Here's the Bloc Québécois saying, you guys have got to take some of these migrants. They've got it wrong, but this is what they're saying.
There's a lot of political game playing going on about sharing the load of asylum seekers. Everyone's going to have to get their act together. Quebec's capacity to accommodate has been exceeded. Our public services are overwhelmed, and more asylum seekers are living in inhumanely precarious conditions.
Those are all really good reasons to just abolish the whole program right there. The whole country is living under circumstances like that, conditions like that. And just because Quebec doesn't like it, well, we should, again, behave as if we're being attacked and respond in that way and treat these human weapons as victims. Honestly, that's what we should do.
If we don't share the burden or refuse to take part, we will be responsible for a humanitarian crisis. The federal government promised to do that, and the provinces said they would do their fair share. What are they going to do now to resolve the impasse? The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Immigration is a cooperative and collaborative file. And it's clear that the Government of Canada has a role to play, a cooperative role to play. And the good news is things are going well and they're getting better. And in recent days, people got ahead of themselves saying that nothing had changed. That's not true. Lots has moved on this file. Lots of details. A letter was sent by the federal government to Mr. Legault spelling out all the things the federal government had done. The honourable member, while everyone is assigning blame, Quebec is still racking up thousands more asylum seekers every month to an already overcapacity situation. The federal government lacks leadership, and some provinces are lacking in humanity, but Quebec's problems are getting worse. For years now, Quebecers have been taking a disproportionate share of Canada's asylum seekers, while Canada has been shirking its responsibilities.
So now we're supposed to be fighting amongst ourselves in Canada instead of saying no more. We can't afford to have any more. And whoever's sending these people, we need to cut them off at the knees. But it's our federal government who's funding them. It's our federal government who's encouraging this. It's our federal government who desperately needs these new players in their Ponzi scheme, or our entire economy collapses. So if you look at it from an MP's perspective, they have a vested interest in bringing these people in, and they think that you would agree with them if you knew what they knew. And what do they know? If they don't bring these people in, the economy will collapse, they think, right? It's the same thing as if we don't lock people down, COVID is going to kill everybody. So if they knew what I know about COVID, then obviously they will be in a situation to agree with me. They don't want people to die, right? And so there's this economic Damascus sword hanging over their neck, right? If you do this, if you don't pay attention to this thing, all these people are going to die, or there's going to be economic devastation, blah, 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 blah. Might be right on the economic devastation. They're 100% not right on the COVID thing, which leads me to believe that it's overblown fear-mongering, and we can restore our economy with a situation where we're stable instead of a growing economy all the time. The growing economy indicates to me Ponzi scheme, and I think it's a Ponzi scheme, and I think the only reason that we're continuing to bring people in is because our economy is precarious, and if you remove all of that, then we're going to collapse. And the collapse is necessary, right? Like the collapse, look at the price of houses, for crying out loud. The price of houses alone is enough to warrant a reset situation, right? In my opinion. So that should happen. And like the politicians that led to these bad policies that led to this collapse should be held accountable, but they're using censorship. They're using all of this money. They're using the money to traffic people, and they're saying it's for the greater good, everyone. It's for the greater good. You don't understand. It's for the greater good. If you knew what I knew, right? It's not the dancing nurses. It's the COVID death that you have to be worried about, right? It's not the immigrations. It's the total collapse of our economy, right? And they're using fear. They're being controlled by fear. And that's a huge problem because we can't even get through to them because they say that's misinformation, la, 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 and they're being encouraged to do that. Here's David Thunder. The other speculation I had was talking about how they're hiding the high death rates with this immigration thing. So the number of people dying is increasing, so they import more people, and so the hole in the economy caused by those people's deaths are filled by this backstop of constant refill population coming in, so you don't see it, right? You just notice the demographic shift. You don't see the missing people, right? You just notice that everybody around when you go out anywhere is a completely different skin color now. Weird, right? Weird. So that's very, very possible. David Thunder says UK Prime Minister Starmer was recently asked during a trip to Washington, D.C. Whether Britons should have more children. He gave a fairly standard liberal answer. He said he was not going to tell people how to live their lives or dictate whether they should have children. The answer he gave is hardly surprising given the dominant liberal ideology of the West casts reproductive choice as a private matter and that the state should stay out of it. However, that his answer is unsurprising does not mean it's satisfactory. To say the state should not be in the business of dictating whether or not citizens should have children is to evade the elephant in the room, namely the fact that the private reproductive choices traditionally considered the sole preserve of individual conscience are now putting in jeopardy the viability of many societies and indeed their very survival. I also speculate that birth control pill was an attack on the West specifically, because like the birth control pill isn't widely available or used in the Middle East, right? Or other places in the world. And we're sold the idea that it's because they're poor or their religion prevents it and so on and so forth. But I think that if you reimagine long-term good way to get rid of a lot of people, like holding people underwater, right? Like drowning people slowly, right? It's kind of, it's slow, but no less effective. And so it takes a bit of time. But if you introduce this thing in 1960 and by 2020, the population collapse is imminent, well, that's a very effective weapon, right? Like very, very effective weapon. And you make it societally kind of bad to have children. Like, why would you bring your kids into this war-torn situation? Why would you bring your kids into this climate change situation? Why would you bring your kids into this racist situation? They're selling all this stuff, and then also the kids who are here, they're trying to trans them and so on and so forth. So it feels very much like there's an attack on a specific group of people with regards to their having babies, and other people don't have this attack. And the birth control pill, once the target population is gone, may die out. I don't know, because it's a very societal thing. Like at one point, when you started being, when the woman was able to have babies, et cetera, and there wasn't a medication to prevent that, then different things were true about our society than they are now, right? And so it hasn't taken very long for our society to completely forget how things were before the birth control pill. And so it's this very interesting thing where the state doesn't have anything to say about reproduction, and reproduction is no longer something that just takes care of itself. And so if the state is allowing people to say, should you really have babies, with climate change and with war and so on and so forth, there's this outside influence. And is that happening from our enemies? Who knows, right? Russia, who knows? China, who knows? But this attack seems multifaceted and targeted to a specific group of people, the West, right? With a specific ideology. I don't know necessarily a specific look, but a specific freedom-based ideology, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of being able to interact with whoever you want, responsibility to live your life in a responsible way and to be responsible for yourself and not live off the state, that kind of stuff. Anyway, I find it very interesting, and I feel like we're under attack. And I think that the high death rate and the fact that we have a low birth rate and all of these other things are going to come to a head. And, well, we're going to have to talk about it, or we're just going to whimper and phase ourselves out of existence. And that's could happen. It's happened before, I think, probably. With societies, there have been genocides with people as well, probably. Like people, they used to be very powerful and now they're gone, right? And so empires rise and fall. Susan, let's talk about the election in Canada. Why not? And Susan says, time to say it. Pierre Poilievre has a likability problem. Has he read the United Nations 2030 agenda yet? He's voted on it a few times, but has he read it yet? I don't know. A bunch of people are pushing back, saying liberal media is pretty crazy. Susan is a liberal media acolyte. She's a national columnist with the Toronto Star, and she's an author and a political journalist. So, she knows how to get the government to pay for her opinions, right? She knows how to do that. She knows how to shop her opinions around. Duncan is responding to this whole thing, and he's saying, what a weird comment. Pierre Poilievre acts if there's power in being unlikable. Based on the last Ipsos polls, Canadians seem to like Pierre Poilievre just fine. So it's very interesting, and they're sharing the likability. And Poilievre has 45%, or this is just popularity overall, 6% for Blanchette, 23% for Singh, 45% for Poilievre, 26% for Trudeau. And it's funny when the news media, political journalists whose bylines say they know what they're talking about, but who clearly have no freaking clue what they're talking about, or are lying on purpose because the apparatus encourages them to lie. Spread misinformation like that. It's very interesting. Here is Mark, and he is talking about how there is election interference. And I think that he's made a good case. I think that this is, I think most Canadians should be concerned about election interference and election rigging. I don't think our elections are above board for multiple reasons. I watched the Toronto mayoral election that Faith Goldie ran in, and she wasn't allowed to run advertisements on Bell Media, and Bell Media said it would ruin our reputation if we ran her advertisement, and that's against the Elections Act. Like, if you give advertising space to one candidate, you have to give the same space to all candidates, and they ignored that, and they didn't have any consequences for that. So that's one way elections are rigged in Canada, and there are many other ways that elections are rigged in Canada. Mail-in ballots are one, many other ways. But and Jason has sent me, and I've published previously, different ways, fungible assets. And this guy, Mark, is talking about a similar way of cheating using same-day registration and the fact that you can vote in any precinct in the province and so on and so forth. And our elections are they're not worth the money that we spend on them because it's not above board. We are running Chinese liberal selection processes, and we are worse off for it every time. So Mark says, the Liberals have been committing election fraud for over a decade. It's how they won in 2015, 2019, and 2021. I will break down a confidential report and investigation from 2007, election fraud, Trinity Spadina, using polling day registrants. So they've been doing this for a long time. And it's not just one party, by the way. I've also sent this report to Friends of Science. They're a good Twitter account. You should follow them if you don't know them. It deals with same-day voter registrations and the verification process for those registrants being allowed to vote. Elections Canada is corrupt, and they even admit possible illegal voting in 2015 and 103,000 illegal names on the list. A record turnout in 2015, possible illegal votes in 2015, illegal voters in the voter registration database, purging 103,000 illegal voters after the 2015 election. So how did they illegally get on the list to vote? They registered to vote on election day. There you go. And he goes through this, and there's a map of Spadina here. He says, here's a breakdown of the polling day registrations on my map for the riding. The ones in red are 65 or more voting day registrations. That's a lot of red. The report doesn't compare these numbers to any other riding, so that's interesting. And he says, here's a map of the unmatched registrations. The purple color is 16 or more unmatched registrations. Notice it covers the same area as the red sections. So they take control of important voting areas, and then they register a whole bunch of extra voters, and they fix the election. They find out how many ballots they need, and they use these fungible, changeable tokens to put them over the top to win the election, right? And so oversimplifying. It's much more complicated. It's a long thread, and I don't have the time to go through all of it. But these tactics are being used all together, along with rhetoric and silencing, censorship, and all that, to mislead voters and to paint a picture that is false, to rig our elections and to keep control of governments. None of our governments, none of the representatives in the House of Commons right now should have our trust. I don't think, because they all engaged in going along with COVID. They all engaged in going along with a whole bunch of these things that they really should not. The Chinese infiltration into our House of Commons should be a full stop. We're not doing anything until this is dealt with, period. Like, we've been governed. I think we've been under foreign occupation since at least 2023 and been aware of it. And before that, I don't know when the foreign occupation started, but it looks like before 2007, right? Like, and I don't know if that's Chinese foreign occupation or WEF foreign occupation, the blob foreign occupation, but it seems like something like that. We've got to get to here before the end of this, the half, and we're not close. I'll jump ahead to the Calgary stuff at the end of the election series here. Conservative Party says weak EB and the radical BC NDP are lying to stay in power. No more spin. Here's what the Conservatives will actually do. This is a commercial talking about cutting, cut. And this is the Conservatives saying, yeah, we're going to cut. So it might be interesting if Pierre Poilievre leaned into, yeah, we're going to cut. We're going to cut the waste. We're going to cut the corruption. We're going to cut the blah, 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 blah. It would be a good slogan, and it would be fun. I mean, Bernier could use it too. Here we go. It says EB is lying to stay in power. Here's what we'll actually cut. Housing costs. Okay, so sorry, it's not a very good commercial for podcasts strictly. So darn it, I messed up my voice. Hold on. Okay, that's better. So I'll play this. It says housing cuts, carbon tax cuts, ER wait time cuts, NDP drug dens cuts, will increase funding for healthcare, education, police, addiction treatment. Vote October 19. So October 19 is the BC elections, so they're doing that. They may benefit for doing an audio commercial where they're talking about what they're going to cut. So, but it's an interesting theme considering all the spending in the world has turned Canada into a post-national hellscape. Tracy Wilson says, she's responding to Amazing Zoltan. Zoltan says, Trudeau's most embarrassing MP doubles down on her incorrect claim that gun violence disproportionately affects women. I'm going to stop platforming Jennifer O'Connell soon, as I'm concerned about being reported for spreading misinformation and disinformation. And Tracy says, men are disproportionately affected by firearm-related violence. 66%, in fact. The government's own data shows us this. And so she links to the data. And here is, and I'm not going to go through it, I believe, Tracy. But here's Jennifer O'Connell making false statements. And even if it were true that women were disproportionately affected by gun violence, banning guns while turning a blind eye to illegal guns carried by gangs and things like that doesn't do anything at all. Like saying, oh no, gun violence impacts women, doesn't solve a problem, doesn't do anything other than cast women as a victim for political reasons, I guess. I don't know what they've gained from it, but that's what the end result is. Here's just a little bit of Jennifer O'Connell.
Mr. Speaker, it's incredibly disturbing to see the member opposite talk about violence against women and then bring in their slogan of carbon tax election. It just shows how disingenuous Conservatives are when it comes to violence against women. And if they truly care about protecting women, then they should support our position on moving forward to get guns that were designed for the battlefield off our streets. As we know, women are disproportionately affected by gun violence, and it's a shame that Conservatives serve the gun lobby ahead of women.
They're delusional. Absolutely delusional. Tim Upall is going after the angle of Justin Trudeau's betrayed the promise of Canada, and that's why they want an election. And again, I say I want a Chinese traitors or in our House of Commons election, not a carbon tax election. But he's going after the rhetoric of carbon tax election, affordability election, et cetera, et cetera. He says Trudeau has destroyed Canada's promise, where if you work hard, you can get a house and you can afford a house you can afford in a safe neighborhood. The NDP Liberal government has doubled the debt, doubled housing and costs, taxed food, punished work, unleashed crime, and the most centralizing government in Canadian history, and is the most centralizing government in Canadian history. So he's saying we're going to fix all that. Not much of a response, like 10 likes weird. It's interesting because you'd think that like he's got a lot of people seeing his stuff, right? 25,000 followers, but not very many people seeing his stuff. Censorship or just not a very popular minister? 25,000 people following him though. So why would only get 10 likes about that? Weird, right? Let's talk about Calgary very quickly. How can you get past the blanket zoning bylaw? And you can do it with restrictive covenants. And so what is a restrictive covenant? Here's just a little bit about it. Look to the group of Calgarians in the southeast community of Lake Bonavista who are under restrictive covenants to protect their neighborhood. Restrictive covenants are legal contracts between neighbors that can prevent the construction of certain types of buildings. The covenants are attached to land titles, meaning they stay in place even when the property owners change hands. They're also known to be challenging to remove, reports the CBC, adding in Lake Bonavista, the goal is to legally prevent developers from tearing down single-family homes for multifamily developments, though residents have agreed to allow secondary suites in basements and garages, which I think is more than reasonable, right? I think a lot of people are very uneasy about what's happening in the community. Karen said, volunteer for the committee running the Lake Bonavista Restrictive Covenant Initiative, told the CBC. She added she is hopeful at least 60% of homeowners in the community sign on in order to prevent developers from buying multiple lots side by side to build large developments. Curtis Marble, the lawyer representing Lake Bonavista residents, told CBC 15 to 20% of the community has agreed to get the restrictive covenants registered to their land titles at a cost of $500 per household. Marble said that his staff has registered about 70 households. Adding restrictive covenants are quite common in Calgary, but often people don't realize it's on their land title because in most cases there wasn't any reason to enforce them in court until recently. Given the city's zoning laws were, until recently in many of those neighborhoods, consistent with what the restrictive covenants were saying, it simply wasn't necessary to go to court. Marble, a partner with a law firm, added that his firm is also working with Chinook Park, Kelvin Grove, and Eagle Ridge on their restrictive covenant initiative, among other communities in the city. So that'd be good if you're somebody who wants to get leads for a business. You could go drop flyers talking about these covenants down in a bunch of people's mailboxes, and then go to a lawyer, a legal place, and say, "Hey, do you want clients for this covenant or this restrictive covenant thing? I've got a bunch of people calling me about who want it for $500. So you could be a broker." Maybe I'll put up a website. I'm just saying, connecting the right people, right? So I'm going to cut the... Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful